Over the past few months, I've come to realize that my planning system needed a change up. After starting the year with a lot of enthusiasm about the systems I was already using, and then getting into a huge journaling slump towards the middle of the year, I was really beating myself up thinking, wait, am I a fraud? Am I actually not good at planning? Turns out that it was less about me not being good at planning, and more so that my system wasn't as aligned with my current life as it could be. One of the things that I love about making my own planners and journals is that as life changes, you can make that reflected in whatever it is you're setting up. If a layout stops working for you, you don't have to keep including it. So in moving from my old journal into this one, I'm making some changes. One of the things that I won't be changing though is that I am using the same size of notebook, so still going with a B6 journal from Archer & Olive. I've been finding that this size is just nice and compact. It's fun to do a little bit of decoration in it, but also with there being less page real estate and fewer pages in this one, it means that the last B6 that I thought was gonna last me 6 months only lasted me 3. Previously, this would have stressed me out a little bit. I was very much on that routine of setting up a new journal with each 6-month period, so one to start in January and last till the midway point of the year, and another to start in July and last until the end of December. Because that's what I was used to, it was kind of what I was expecting was gonna happen with the last B6, but given that it only lasted 3 months, I actually came to realize that this aligns really well with how I like to set my goals. I find that when it comes to my goal planning and getting, it is much easier for me to focus on a 3-month period than it is for me to focus on 6 months or a year or longer. 3 months is a really nice amount of time for me to maintain my focus, but also make genuine progress. So I figured that given I'm already using that kind of system for my goals, why not also just use it for my journal? There's no rules saying that I only have to set up a new journal every 6 months. Even though it's what I've been used to for the past few years, that doesn't mean it's the way it has to be. I've really been trying to challenge these assumptions that I've had for myself, and it's nice to bring that into my journal this time around as well. One of the assumptions that I always used to have with a bullet journal is that it had to have a future log. Now yes, the future log is one of the core bullet journal collections, and typically we will see people set them up in their journal. But I never used it. I wouldn't think to turn back to it, I wouldn't check in with it, which kind of meant that setting it up was just done for the bullet journal aesthetic, and not so much because it was genuinely useful to me. When it comes to timed appointments, I much prefer to put these in a calendar that's digital, because then if they need to move around, if the times change, it's very easy to make those updates and not have to cross things out or erase them if you used a pencil or erasable pen. So in terms of my setup, I am not going to be including a future log, or at least not a formal one. More on that in a bit, but what I am setting up here is a year at a glance, or kind of a variation of it. Because this journal is only going to last me 3 months, and I know that going into it, I don't really see a lot of point in having all of the dates for all of the next year in here. I figured it would be helpful to have it for at least this quarter and probably next quarter, so those are the ones that I'm going to be putting in. Something that makes this a little bit different to what you might have seen before though is that I'm not just putting in monthly calendars. Because I actually don't do monthly planning, what's more helpful for me is having a quarter overview that's broken down into cycles. A cycle for me is a 4-week block, and each quarter has 3 cycles for 12 weeks, and then an additional week at the end that I like to call reset week, or the 13th week. I find that working in cycles and quarters is just a lot easier for my brain to be able to appreciate the passage of time, and appreciate the amount of time I have left in any given period. Because the months of the year have a different number of days, and they start on different days of the week, I just found it kind of tricky to appreciate how much time I had left in any month, whereas if I use cycles, where we have 4-week blocks, each week is 25% of the cycle. Each of the cycles starts on a Monday. Each of the cycles has the same amount of time, the same number of days, and that uniformity is peace-inducing for my brain. In terms of the little at-a-glance calendars that I'm setting up here, you can see we have 2 separate boxes. So the one on the left-hand side is going to be for quarter 4, or the last 3 months of 2025, whereas the one on the right is for quarter 1 of 2026. In terms of the columns I've written in, I have C for cycle, W for the week number, and then the initials for each of the days of the week. I like to start mine on a Monday, so M through to S. This is one of the layouts that I found the most helpful for my last start of journal setup, and when it comes to planning out any new setup in my journal, I do like to consider what worked and what didn't in the last one to kind of inform how I should do my next setup. While I might work on cycles, I know a decent chunk of the world still works with months though, so I figured that in this year at a glance kind of page, it would also be helpful to have the monthly breakdowns too. On those ones, it's a little easier to pull out when the first of any month is versus the last day of the month, which can be important for things like analytics, bills, and other similar things. I did find that in my last journal, I checked in with the monthly ones less than the cyclic views, but it was still helpful to have both of them handy. I think the cyclic one in particular was helpful for me to have because I don't have anywhere else that has that information, whereas for the monthly views I could just go and look at a digital calendar, but given that I got value in both, I figured I would include both this time around too. For these ones, we have M through to S for each of the days of the week, and then at the end we also have a W. This is for the week number for the year as a whole, rather than for within my cycles. So while the cycles are numbered 1 through 4, 1 through 4, 1 through 4, on the monthly calendars we have them numbered from 40 through to 52 for the 2025 dates, and then week 1 through to week 5 for the 2026 dates. One thing you might also notice is that my quarter 1 for next year starts on the 29th of December. This is something that's also a little bit different for my planning system compared to most other people's, in that because I do cyclic planning and because I really value that Monday start as being the start of any cycle, rather than the first of any year being the start of a cycle, that means that my quote New Year's Day is actually the 29th of December this year. If you are curious about cyclic planning, how it works, and why I decided to go to that system, we do have a separate video on the channel that breaks it down a little bit further. But in terms of the setup of this page, I was just going to leave it as the top and bottom borders that we had and have the calendars in the middle. But once I'd put those in, I realized there was a lot of white space, and I don't love white space in my journal. I like it when my pages feel really full. I don't want them to look overly busy, but I don't really love there being a lot of blank space. For that reason, I did also decide to add in some little cloud stickers. Those ones are from Journal Say, and the tape that I used at the top and bottom of the page is an old release from the washi tape shop. It is one of my favorite tape sets. I've used it multiple times in my journaling for multiple setups, just because I think it is absolutely gorgeous. But the problem is, they don't sell it anymore. It was called Fairy's Nest. I hope that they bring it back or do another collab with that artist at some point because they do amazing work. But for any of the supplies I have been able to list in the description box, you can find them down there. In terms of timing, from first to final touches of the pen, that first spread took about 30 minutes to set up. I was being quite cautious because it was the first layout that we have in the journal, and also going and writing in all the little numbers does take a second. But in doing your journal setup, you don't actually have to write in all the little numbers if you don't want to. I personally preferred the handwritten look for the setup I'm doing this time around, but other times I will definitely just use a free printable to get all of those little calendars in without having to go and number all of the calendars myself, and then possibly stuff up somewhere in the middle, and then stuff up multiple calendars and have to fix them. It's just a bit of a headache. So if in doing your new journal setup, you want a nice easy and quick way to put those mini calendars in without having to give yourself a hand cramp and a half, then in the description box we do also have a link to our free resource library, which has over 96 variations of monthly calendars that you can just print off and stick into your journal. We have Sunday start versus Monday start, single digit versus double digit calendars. So for instance, do you want to have 01 on the calendar or just the number 1 for the first of any month? And new this year, I've also put in cyclic calendars. So if you want to use cyclic planning for 2026 like I am, then we have printables for those as well. As said, those ones are all linked in the description box, or you can use the QR code on screen to just jump over there. In terms of the layout we're setting up here though, this is going to be my take on a future log, but it's not really a future log, mainly because I'm setting this one up knowing full and well that I probably won't come and check back in with it throughout the lifetime of this journal. And you might be thinking, Jess, what the heck is the point of setting it up then? Like, why would you go to the effort? Well, that's because I know that when it comes to quarter 4 of the year in particular, I love to have a kind of like bird's eye view of each of the weeks and what's going to be happening. Quarter 4 is oftentimes a very busy period for me, not only because we have end of year celebrations like Christmas and birthdays and all of that kind of thing, but also because we have Vlogmas coming up. Vlogmas is something that we do every December on the channel where I release a video per day in the areas of productivity, goal getting, journaling, all of that kind of thing. And it is definitely a lot of work, but it is also a lot of fun. I like to be able to see at a glance when I have things going on across the quarter so that I can prepare in advance for the big undertaking that Vlogmas is. I want to be able to see when I will or won't be able to work on video content, when releases are coming out on the channel, and everything else that's going on. If you want to make sure that you don't miss out on our Vlogmas content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. We would love to have you with us. But in terms of the structure that we have for this layout, I'm using 2 doc grid rows for each of the weeks that we have in the quarter. Because I had a little bit of extra space, I did also go and include the first week of quarter 1 for next year, but I accidentally numbered this number 14, but it's fine. I know what I meant. The actual amount of real estate in each of the boxes that I end up with for each of the days isn't all that big, but really it doesn't need to be. This calendar is essentially just to mark in when I can and can't work and some very simplified versions of recording what's happening. I don't need this one to replace my full calendar with all of my appointments and events that I'm still going to be storing in a digital space, but this one is more so a quarterly overview for myself. To keep myself organized, I put in the week numbers down the left-hand column and added the day initials along the top, but something that I thought would be particularly helpful is adding in the date number. So for instance, writing 29, 30, 1, 2, 3. I figured that from context I don't really need to add in the month as well, but at least having the day number would be useful for me. For timing, this one took about 18 minutes to set up, but as per always, this time doesn't include the pre-planning time, which are things like figuring out the structure of the layouts, preparing the printed materials like the header stickers. More so, that time is just what you see on screen. I essentially figure out my time estimates by the amount of footage that I have, but with this one set up, it's time to flip on over to the next spread, which is going to be a space to capture my plans for the Change Your Life Challenge. The first round of the Change Your Life Challenge ran from July through to the end of September of 2025, and I found it hugely successful for not only holding me accountable to my goals, but also holding other people accountable to theirs as well. A lot of people commented on the fact that they were actually able to get underway with their goals, which they haven't been able to previously, so I thought it would be a good idea to do a second round. The Change Your Life Challenge is also known as the 3 months to Change Your Life Challenge, and it's where over a period of 3 months, we commit to something that we think is going to have a genuine positive impact on our life in some way. In its simplest form, the challenge is really just undertaking one thing consistently over 3 months, but a lot of our goal getters decided to work on multiple things, much in the same way that I did, because I just like there to be that kind of like choice that comes with having multiple things to work on. But through doing the challenge, I achieved so much more in quarter 3 than I had in quarter 2. I fully decluttered my house, maintained a daily exercise practice, tackled home projects, and got married, and I know that a decent amount of that progress was because of the accountability that the challenge offered. I'll leave a link to the introduction video in the description box, but the way that this layout is going to work is as a space to capture what my goals for the challenge are going to be, and also organize when I'm going to work on what. Only in the broadest of senses, because I do fully plan my goals out in my goal planner, which is a separate notebook, but throughout the challenge and the weekly vlogs that I make to go alongside it, I like to have weekly themes so that I can kind of space out my efforts and make the progress vlogs a little more interesting. For instance, some of the weekly themes we had in the first round of the challenge were the decluttering project. We had tackling a week where your motivation dips. We had one where I tackled all of my most procrastinated tasks, and of course wedding week. So in preparing my work for the second round of the challenge, I also want to map out my goals and tie them to individual weeks so that we have some kind of like highlights or interest points going throughout. Plus it helps me space my work out so I'm not working on everything all at once. Because it is a 3-month challenge, I only needed 13 weeks on here, and I didn't want to expand it to any kind of like 14th week. But because I pre-planned the layout, it meant I wasn't left with any white space around that section on the right-hand page. I very much like how having the tape running along the top and the bottom of the layout fully frames that section. On the left-hand side though, this is where I'm just going to write out what my goals are. I do technically capture this in my goal planner as well, as a list kind of view, but in trying to change my planning system to really lean into what's working for me at the moment, one of the things that is definitely working for me is my goal setting system. Like how I set and plan and go after my goals. One of the most important parts of the challenge, and about my goal getting in general, is keeping track of my progress. So I wanted to have a lot more layouts in my start of journal setup that are dedicated to the goals I'm going to be working on and keeping track of working on those things. That means having a checklist of the goals and being able to check those off as I accomplish them very much fits the bill for keeping a record of my progress. I find that oftentimes, if we don't actively keep track of the progress we're making towards our goals, we can get to the end of any kind of week or month or full quarter just wondering, what did I even accomplish? What did I even do? I hate that feeling and definitely fall victim to it, but having spaces like this in my journal to keep track of what I've been doing helps me combat this. In terms of timing, this one took about 15 minutes to set up, and then it's time to flip on over to some of the layouts that I'm dedicating to the goals that I'm going to be working on. I don't necessarily have a spread for every single goal that I'll be working on, but for the ones where having a big picture or kind of like start of journal view would be helpful, I wanted to make sure that I brainstormed any possible layouts that could help me visualize my progress or keep track of my efforts. Yes, all of the actual action steps are going to be summarized in my goal planner, but I wanted the layouts in here to be a record of achievement. That's mainly because something that I've come to realize I really value in my planning system is that my planners aren't just for planning. They're kind of for record keeping or memory keeping as well. It wasn't until recently that I actually realized this has been a through line in all of my journals. Yes, I am primarily using them for productivity, organization, goal getting, that kind of thing, but I also love being able to look back through those notebooks and see what life was like at any period in time, even if it's just a meal log that very clearly shows that Jess was having the exact same thing for breakfast for an entire month. Or more. The thing that I'm going to be keeping track of on this spread though are my goals related to physical health, mainly in the areas of exercise and nutrition. One of my kind of big overarching goals for this year has been getting better at preparing my meals in advance, especially for breakfast and lunches, and as part of this also trying some new foods, but I really want to double down on that trying new recipes thing in Q4. I've been finding that some of my meals, in particular for dinners and lunches, have been getting a little bit stale. I'm not feeling as inspired by them, but meanwhile I've been coming across heaps of recipes that I'm like, ooh, that looks great, I would love to give that a go, and then just not trying them. For that reason, on this layout, I'm going to have a box dedicated to those recipes that I want to try, so writing down the ones that are potential for the quarter ahead and then checking them off as I actually make them. And the two boxes that I have on the bottom of either side of the layout, those are going to be for recording my meal prepping for breakfasts and lunches. I don't really mind eating the same thing for breakfast or lunch every day of the week, but I do like to have some variation when it comes to dinner, so my meal prep efforts have mainly been going to those first 2 meals of the day. Another goal that I kind of want to work on though is finding different exercises or trying out other ones that I'm kind of curious about. While I have been very consistent with my current exercise program of walking every day, I figured it would be fun to branch out and see if there are any other kinds of exercise that I enjoy too. I'll probably be doing these in a more casual sense, so just finding at-home YouTube tutorials rather than going and joining a gym or anything like that, because the idea of having to leave my house to go to exercise is not an appealing one, and if I make it too difficult, I just won't do it. Each of these spaces I've kept very simple though. It's effectively just a box with a second line highlight to add some visual interest and more readability to the space. And then I've mainly focused that decoration down either side of the spread, using more of that gorgeous tape set that I wish they hadn't sold out of. This layout took about 12 minutes to set up, coming in as the speediest for the setup so far. But flipping over, the next spread is also for goal getting, but this one being related to the areas of fun and learning. It's always a fun challenge to figure out how I want to combine elements in my start of journal setup so that I have things in a sequential order that makes sense to my brain, where I have layouts that are related to each other next to each other, or at least one after the other. And so I decided to group fun and learning together, mainly because for the learning in particular, I really did not need a full page dedicated to it, but for the fun, I kind of needed a page and a half. This meant that given the amount of space that each of those things needed, I could kind of combine them to fill up a full spread. But in terms of the sections that I'll be including on here, we're gonna have one related to date nights with my partner Vogel, one related to general social time with like friends, family, that kind of thing, one that's dedicated to my days off each week, one that's dedicated to creativity, and then the last one being for a reading plan for myself. Having a think about those sections and the goals they actually relate to, in terms of the date night, this is something that Vogel and I have been doing in Q3, really actively trying to have one date night per week, where we alternate who organizes that date night. So I'll organize one week, he'll organize the next, I'll organize the one after, so on and so forth. And it honestly has been so fun. We've been meaning to do more regular date nights for literally years, but then through the accountability of tackling the Change Your Life challenge, we've both been a lot more incentivized to actually do them. I want to make sure that I keep up on those in Q4, so I wanted to have a space to record what date nights we go on, what we've been doing, that kind of thing. In terms of social time, there are plenty of social events to organize at the end of the year, or at least I always find there are, so I wanted to have a space to log those happenings as well. I want to make my social events fun and memorable, but another thing that I also would like to have fun with are my days off. I feel like I have been taking days off but not been very intentional about them, so they haven't felt as restful as they could have been. In wanting to really honor those days off, make sure I'm getting them, make sure I'm using them effectively, I figured that having a space to record what I did on my days off would be helpful too. I've got 14 spaces for myself there because I want to have at least one day off per week, so I figured that recording the most special or impactful day off from any week would be what I put here. In terms of the box for creativity, I thought it would be fun to undertake some new creative projects, especially because I've been feeling like I'm not really in tune with my creativity that much at the moment. I'd like to possibly try out some different styles or different mediums, not too sure yet, but I figured that as I undertake those things, I could record them in here too. As for the reading plan, this one is related to my goal of tackling at least 2 of my TBR veterans, or books that have been on my to be read list for quite a while. Rather than just putting them off to be a next year me problem, I thought it'd be nice to actually commit to reading them before the new year arrives. This layout took about 13.5 minutes to set up though, and I absolutely love the foiling on the tape. I think it is so pretty, but this is also something that I really value about, doing my planner myself and getting to decorate it. If it looks nice, I'm much more likely to use it. By putting in the time and effort to make it a little more decorative and make it a bit more fun, it means that I'll be more incentivized to come back and check in with these pages, thus actually keeping my goal progress at the front of my mind, and in turn making more progress in the long run. Another decorative element that I used to kind of lean into the theme was the lettering style for all of the headers. This one is a font called Starlight Rune, and I appreciate that by playing around with the font settings, you can get different flourishes on certain letters, just to add a little bit of fun and some visual interest. The next goal category I have though is organization, with this one mainly containing goals related to my second brain, digital decluttering, and organizing important information. While I used to capture a lot of my reference lists in an analog journal, that one being called my long-term collections journal, I've since realized that this isn't the default space for me to check when it comes to referencing that information. Rather than trying to change the habit of where I look to find said info, I'd rather just capture it in a place that's a bit more natural for me to go and reference, and that is my second brain in Notion. This is something that I've been working on for quite a while, but I want to make it an intentional goal for Q4 to get in there, make sure the structure is the way I want it, and to transfer everything that I have stored in a variety of different places into that one central location. I appreciate the searchability of Notion and the fact that I can access it on the desktop app or on my phone or my iPad, and this is also a system that I'm already using for my content creating calendar, so anything that I make for the channel or for memberships or book club event scheduling or anything like that already gets captured in Notion, so it's a system I'm already actively using, as opposed to my long-term collections journal, which was really just for long-term collections. I'm really excited about more formally moving into Notion for all of these things, and so the sections that I have on here specifically related to that goal are the recipe transfer, which is over on the right-hand page, because one of the things that I'm building in my Notion space is my recipe book, and also a section that I'm calling life lists to make, or this is essentially reference materials that I want to store in Notion as well. In terms of the other sections that I have on the layout though, we have 2 boxes dedicated to digital decluttering. Those ones are really just going to be for a general task list, and then also another box for future me problems. Tackling my future me problems has been a Q3 goal, and I am slowly getting through them, but I think there are still going to be some that I want to action at some point. They're just not something that I can really focus on right now. I don't want to lose what those tasks are though, and just in case I collect any more throughout the quarter, I want a designated space to be able to jot those down. This spread took about 13.5 minutes to set up though, but now that it's done, it's time to flip on over to another goal-related spread, this one being for Vlogmas. Vlogmas is always a fun challenge that I look forward to each year, and just in case you haven't been here for a Vlogmas before, essentially it's where we have a video released on the channel for every day in December. These ones are always in the areas of productivity, goal setting, getting ready for the new year, journaling and the like. So to make sure that you don't miss out on Vlogmas this year, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We would love to have you here with us. In terms of what I'm going to be using this layout for though, it's just going to be a spot to write down the ideas that I have for Vlogmas, the potential videos that I could make as part of that series, and then go and pick and choose which days I'll be posting them. The boxes that I have on both pages are going to end up being tables where I can just write down what the video idea is, what date I end up deciding to post it, and then check off once I've prepared all the materials for it. In previous iterations of this layout, I've broken it down a little bit more to be like idea generation, preparing the materials, filming, editing, uploading, all of that kind of thing. But because I end up keeping track of that kind of stuff on Notion already, there's not a lot of point in duplicating the information for myself in my journal. Having a space to just check it off is totally sufficient and still helps to keep me organized, because organization in a project like Vlogmas is very important. If there is anything that you would love to see in Vlogmas, one of those videos that we have per day in December to get ready for the new year or reflect on the year that was, just let me know in the comments. I still have some gaps in my content calendar at this stage, so I could probably slot something in for you. This layout took about 21 minutes to set up, and then we're on to the spread that actually took the least amount of time to set up, coming in at about 11.5 minutes. Given the fact that with each new journal setup you can very much iterate on your system, figure out new layouts that are going to help you get rid of ones that you don't really need anymore, I like to be able to keep track of what is or isn't working throughout the life of any journal. That means that when I go to set up my next one, I already have some ideas about what I should or maybe don't want to include. For that reason, I do very much enjoy having a new journal setup page in my new journal setup, mainly to think ahead to the next journal. It's always kind of interesting putting this layout in here because it's as if I'm already thinking about the journal after the one I haven't even started using. But when it comes to planning a new journal setup, similar to what I did for this one, I like to go through what I call the want analysis. This is figuring out the wins, or the stuff that worked in the current journal, any aversions I had, or stuff that I didn't really use, it didn't really work out, any needs that I have for the upcoming journal, and then anything I want to try out or test. By breaking my reflection of any journal down into these sections, it helps me do a thorough job of planning out what I want to include in any new journal setup. I find that this want analysis process is really good for any type of setup you're doing, whether it's a new journal completely, or even just a new monthly setup, a new weekly setup. And in fact, it does technically have applications outside of journaling as well. Doing the want analysis helps me figure out what layouts I'm going to include in the new setup, but then once I've got those, I need to figure out how I'm going to sequence them and how they're going to look. And that's what the page on the right is going to be for. Essentially jotting down the titles of what those pages will be and drawing out some little thumbnails for them. Now, my thumbnails that I'm putting in might look a little bit interesting given the fact that they have square pages, and that's because at this stage I'm already kind of eager to go back to a square notebook. I didn't want to do it for the last 3 months of this year because I figured that sticking with a B6, which is a little bit more familiar, is just going to be helpful as I'm undertaking a project like Vlogmas and everything else I want to do at the end of the year. But maybe in setting up for the new year, a square is something I could go back to. If I don't end up going with a square journal, I can always just cover up this layout and put in thumbnails that have the right kind of dimensions, but at this stage, I'm very tempted for a square. I do love a square notebook. Flipping back so that we can flip through, one of the things that I'm most excited for with this setup is just how tailored to my goals it is. I think that moving from a 6-month system to a quarterly system for my journal setups is going to be really helpful in leaning into that intentionality, selecting and making my layout so that they can help me as I work towards my goals, and thus in turn getting more stuff done. I do enjoy treating each new quarter like a little fresh start, so being able to have a fresh start in my journal as well is a really nice way to lean into that. A lot of what I've put into this start of journal setup is tailored towards tackling the Change Your Life Challenge in quarter 4. I am very much looking forward to the challenge, and if you were curious about it and wanted to get involved, then this video is the next one to check out. In that one, I talk about what the challenge is, how you can get involved with it, and we would definitely love to have you on board, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.